Well, good afternoon. We apologize because we cannot go via the microphones. And so that's why we need to speak a little bit more louder, and I would very much appreciate if we could keep a little bit of the silence more in the room. Because of the lack of the power, so we have to adjust to the situation that we are at the moment. So thank you very much, dear friends, professors, students of the Dartmouth College. The symposium, Unspeakable Truth, has provided an excellent occasion for a comprehensive and multifaceted discussion centered on the aftermath and the road to recovery of two destructive European conflicts, the Balkans War of the 1990s and the Basque ETA armed conflict in Spain, France. More broadly, it has also been an excellent opportunity to address the urgent action needed in redefining the role and participation of women in the aftermath of the war, as well as in peace and security efforts, with a seat at the negotiable table. The discussions of the past 2 days have been more relevant than ever due to the current state of world affairs, the complexity of geopolitics, and the catastrophic and absurd Russian invasion of Ukraine, an invasion that has destroyed cities and millions of families, fueling a humanitarian crisis and insecurity around the world. My dear friends, I would like us all to stand up and applause for Annabelle Martin because without her hard work and dedication, this would not happen and we would not be here. So once again, Anna, my dear friend, in bold, thank you very much from the bottom of our heart. Chechu, thank you also for all of the hard work that you have done. During these 2 days, I have heard different stories, those of hard work, of personal experience, and persistency. It's a pity if we all allow these stories and discussions to be forgotten. Therefore, as an outcome of this conference, there will be written the principles from the symposium, Unspeakable Truth, Political Violence, Gender and Reconciliation, named as the Dartmouth Principles. This document will set some guidelines and recommendations that will address the issues that we have discussed and the way forward. The purpose of these principles is to forward them to the main decision-making global centers which deal with women, peace and security, such as the United Nations, European Union and NATO. So my dear friends, time and time again, history shows that the consequences of war are very deep. The wounds are very deep, not only from the perspective of the insurgents and institutions, but also from the perspective of the human lives. Because we know that wars does not end only when bombing ends. The consequences endure for much longer than we really think. War crimes carry such a stigma and taboo that it makes it extremely difficult to address and remediate. Suffering and pain in victims persists for the decades. Families are disintegrated, cultural identities destroyed, and the burden of psychological and physical consequences are carried throughout the life. It is women who suffer the most in war-torn regions. Women are targeted by the use of rape or sexual slavery as a tactic of war. They are forced to flee their homes. At the same time, women are the only ones that are not killing or pillaging and plundering or destroying or raping. Instead, they are the ones who keep life going on during the conflict and who are essential to rebuilding communities should peace return. Empowering women survivors of war is thus a global imperative. When we empower women, we empower much of the society. By empowering women, we empower the family unit, we empower children, and we empower men as well. By empowering women, we promote peace. And to quote Ms. Zainab Salbi herself, "Like life, peace begins with women. We are the first to forge lines of alliance and collaboration across conflict divides." The domino effect is profound. In this context, today we are fortunate to host a remarkable woman and a leader, Ms. Zainab Salbi, to share her wealth of experience, perspective, and her thoughts on finding a new ways forward for women, and in particular, the women survivors of war. Ms. Salbi is the founder of Women for Women International, a grassroots development organization dedicated to helping women survivors of war rebuilding their lives and their communities. Her dedication, wisdom, and accomplishment in fighting for women survivors provides a powerful example for the world to learn from these experiences and to channel development efforts and responses targeting survivors in the correct manner as so to maximize their social impact. Since its founding in 1993, Women for Women International, under the leadership of Ms. Salbi, has helped over 500,000 women survivors of the war worldwide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Afghanistan, Rwanda, Nigeria, Iraq, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, and in my own country, Kosovo. Through its tailored development response model, Women for Women International has helped women survivors access income and social opportunities through vocational skills education. It has also helped them develop health and psychological well-being by connecting survivors to a network that they can rely on for the support, strength, and solidarity amid conflict and displacement. The impact of the Women for Women's International has been profound. Since its inception, the organization has distributed over $100 million in direct aid and microcredit loans, reaching more than 2 million family members from around the world. Ms. Salbi received her undergraduate degree from George Mason University in Sociology and Women's Studies. She received a master's degree in development studies from the London School of Economics. Since that, Ms. Salbi has dedicated her personal and professional life to be an advocate and humanitarian activist for women, and in particular, women survivors of war, spearheading development, educational, and leadership programs to empower underrepresented and marginalized women survivors. Her activism has earned her and Women for Women International more awards, honors, and accolades than I can even count on. A few examples. Women for Women International was awarded the Conrad and Hilton Humanitarian Prize in 2006, the very first time such an award has been given to a women's organization. Foreign Policy magazine named Ms. Salbi one of the 100 leading global thinkers and one of the 100 extraordinary women who shaped the world. Oprah Winfrey identified her as one of the 25 women changing the world. Ms. Salbi received the 2010 David Rockefeller Bridging Leadership Award, and President Clinton nominated her as one of the 21st century's heroines. Ms. Salbi is also an author of the bestseller Between Two Worlds, Escape for Tyranny, Growing Up in the Shadow of Saddam, and the Other Side of the War, Women's Stories of the Survivors and Hope. More recently, Ms. Salbi published 2 books, If You Know Me, You Would Care, in 2012, and her latest work, Freedom is an Inside Job, Owning Our Darkness and Our Light to Heal Ourselves and the World, in 2018. This year, Ms. Salbi, along with other renowned female leaders in the women's rights, climate and philanthropic sectors, such as Judy Allen, Justin Winters, and Sophia DeMeyer, has launched Daughters for Earth, a new philanthropic campaign to mobilize women around the world to engage in climate action. Daughters of Earth is currently raising over $100 million with the objective of allocating more capital into the hands of the women working on climate solution on the ground. Today, women-led initiatives continue to be undervalued and drastically underfunded. Daughters for Earth seek to narrow this gap while recognizing the disproportionate impact of climate change on the women and girls, as well as the powerful, sustainable impact women-led initiatives can have on their own communities. Ms. Salbi is also a host of Redefined podcast, which, in its words, aims to uncover the hidden gifts that emerge from adversity, to discover the power of reinvention, and to learn from one another establishment and sense of community. So even our most intimate transformations never have to be experienced alone. All in all, Ms. Salbi is recognized as a top woman activist and campaigner and a female heroine who has inspired and shaped development responses to gender issues, and in particular those directed at women survivors of the war. So my dear friends, join me in extending a very warm welcome to our dear friend and extraordinary woman like Zainab Salbi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really generous. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And next time I'm supposed to get my glasses here.
Well, you did very well without glasses. Thank you so much. And forgive me to, here, this is better maybe. Forgive me to stand in here. I do need my notes. It's truly an honor to be in everyone's presence today. Special thanks to President Yahyaga for her generous introduction. And to all of you, I've been most inspired in the last 2 days. I'm thankful for Annabelle Martin for your invitation and for pulling this together. It's leaving me so much food for thought and hungry for more information and to dig deeper on how do we go about the process of healing after so much violence in the world. So truly, truly thank you. And I'm just humbled to be in this conversation with you. I also know that the last session we cut it short, so perhaps, not to prolong our conversation, but in the discussion, I would love everyone to be part of the discussion rather than just a one-off questions and answers, because I'm in the presence of experts. I'm also not talking about my professional work. I'm neither talking about Women for Women International, nor am I talking about Daughters for Earth. I am talking about my journey of living, working, and reporting from wars in the last since I was 11 years old, which means in the last 40 years. I had to calculate for a second in my head, you know. Wars have unfortunately shaped my life in many, many ways. And I don't want to be repetitive of some of the conversations that has happened in the last couple of days. You know, we talked about what the roles of war and in terms of what it does to women and violence against women. We talked today about healing and from the victim's perspective, how do you go about healing? Today I want to, you know, to keep the conversation going, I hope that I can contribute of what it means to be the aggressor. The story really started with my visit to Mosul from my home country, Baghdad, Iraq. I'm from Baghdad, so I think of the whole country as Baghdad, from Iraq, you know. Those who are from capitals understand the feeling, you know, from my home country, Iraq. And it was 3 weeks after ISIS was overthrown. And I was not on any professional mission. I had no job to go there, no journalistic job or humanitarian job. I honestly really was devastated that how could my own people in my own language, using prayers that are close to my heart and history that I grew up with and music and sounds that brought me joy, how could that very people, my language, my prayer, commit such act of evil? I could not understand it, and it was the most devastating thing that I have encountered. Now, I've encountered a lot of things, just like, let's back off in here. I have been personally encountered more than domestic violence. I encountered violence. I worked with women survivors in wars for many decades. I have encountered women being gang raped, cut, mutilated, pillaged, burned. I have, been in the mud with up to my knees working with women in wars, from, as President Yahyaga said, from Bosnia, where I started when I was 23 years old, all the way, followed all the wars, Rwanda, Kosovo, Congo, Nigeria, Southern Sudan, Afghanistan. I've seen it all, right? And it was in all of these things, ironically speaking, these dynamics that creates when you're working in other wars, a clear dynamics. There's still heartbreaking dynamics. But as was mentioned in the earlier lecture before, it's created a very simple paradigm of us and them. They're good people and they're bad people. They're victims and they're aggressors. And then you can go on about who is the us and them as much as you want. They are in Rwanda, there's the Hutus and the Tutsis. In Bosnia, they're the Serbs and they're the Bosniaks or the Croats. And in all of them, there is us and them, and it's very clear. In gender dynamics, there's men and women. You're angry, And that very clear division of this group of people impose aggression on this group of people is, of course, I would not deny, it leads to a lot of anger. Anger is a very charged word. I'm very comfortable with the idea of anger. I do believe in anger as long as it just creates a spark and not you don't keep on putting fire into the fire. If it's okay, for me, anger is okay if it creates a charge, but never okay to keep the fire bigger and bigger. But created anger, and that anger led me to lead a lot of my accomplishments that President Yahyaga talked about. It led me, when I was 28 years old, by that time, Women for Women is already helping hundreds of women and it's raising thousands. Then by the time I'm 35, it's like raising millions of dollars and mobilizing thousands of women. And I would go to different countries and say, women, speak up and talk and, mobilize. And when people said, what kept you going? I was like, I am pissed off at injustice. That's what kept me going. I am angry and I'm not going to keep on. And it was a great charge, right? And then over time, you get used to not used to in a pathetic way, you start seeing the patterns of behavior of wars and patterns of violence, right? Especially as what I was focusing on gender. I talked a little bit about it, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but everyone has contributed to that discussion. Women and children are 80% of the refugees in the world. They are the majority of the people victimized in the world. First thing that happens in the world, in the war, that it's trafficking of women and children. Right now, as we speak in Ukraine, by the way, I mean, there's so much discussion about war. 60% of orphans in Ukraine have already been trafficked. Okay, not only Ukrainian women are being trafficked, immigrant women in Ukraine, you know, from Asia or from Africa, whatever, no one, like these are layers and layers that not much is talked about, right? They've already been trafficked. The funding that women's groups in Ukraine need is actually not aid, not food. They need funding to protect immigrant women who are in Ukraine, because Poland is allowing Ukrainian women out but not allowing African women out who are, as you know, so these layers and layers, but you almost at one point you get used to, it's not used to in a pathetic way, as I said, used like, okay, here it goes again, wrap up, you know, put up your sleeves, and again, let's tackle that issue. And in the same thing, you get used to it. Okay, then women are impacted the most by violence. As I said yesterday, they are doing the most work to keep life going. Their voices are not acknowledged. Their funding is not getting to them. They get 10 cents out of every dollar. It's the pattern of behavior that you actually get to see, right? And then you also, in a good way, you get to see that few things. And just quickly, because I don't want to be repeating a lot of the things that has been talked about already. In a quick way, you also end up seeing, most recently for me, in your face, two things based on the Afghan crisis a few months ago only. Two things really. You end up learning that okay, women are marginalized, and at the end of the day, we need to put our act together, and only when women put the act together, we can get the job done. I mean, I'm not even being cynical, I'm just tired. You know, I'm tired of the exact same pattern does not change. And the second thing, the second issue is in our face over and over again that we women are second-class citizens. Actually, we are fifth-class citizens. And this, the one that was slapped in the face most recently was the case in Afghanistan. So there was a lot of evacuation. Everyone was talking about the evacuation of Afghan allies of the US and Europe. Well, there was no one talked about, okay, is women who are targeted for assassination by the Taliban. A list of 250 women who the Taliban have actually identified, and the CIA has actually found out, and there was no evacuation attempts to evacuate these women leaders. These women could be, by the way, if it was in the countries of Kosovo or Bosnia, it would have been our friends here, right? Because they're public women, they're known women, and we know women get assassinated. I'm sure all of you know women who I know my friends got assassinated in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen. We know women get assassinated because they are threatening. Wow. I'll keep going. If you're okay with me keeping going. This is like a nighttime story that I hope it does not give you nightmares. We know women get assassinated. And so in this case of Afghanistan, not one effort that was led to actually evacuate women. And if it wasn't a group of women that created an informal coalition from the government and non-government, we raised $10 million in a month's time, chartered our own planes, and evacuated 1,200 women and their families into safety in Albania. And so the story of behavior that keeps on continuing. Should I continue? Are we all with me, or you want to pause? Oh, okay. So the story of behavior that women are victimized, no one is going to do much about it until women get together and do something about it and solve the day, keeps happening. And the story of behavior that all these leaders, you know, a lot of the leaders, not all, a lot of the leaders who speak a lot of good speeches in Women's Day, you know, I'm actually really talking about President Biden, who are like the good guys, who are speaking about good president speeches in Women's Day and all of these things. When push comes to shove, we are a fifth, like second, third, fourth class citizens. We are not prioritized. And in the case of Afghanistan, honestly, it was a slap in the face, not only to Afghan women, it was a slap in the face to American women, who, when we realized the officials in America had no interest in actually prioritizing or supporting evacuation efforts of women leaders. And so, okay, that's fine. You get used to that story. You're not used to that story. You know that this is the pattern of behavior. You then, it's still us and them. It's very clear. Anger still has a charge. Emotion still has a charge. And then you keep on going. That's the sort of the arc of the story that I've been used to, right? Until a moment in my life where things started changing. Because up until that moment, my activism was, as I call it, from my chest out. You know, I am shouting in anger at trying to address these issues that we talked about and I just summarized, right? But then I was one time covering a story for CNN on trafficking of women in India. And it's not easy to talk about to talk to a trafficker in India, right? But with my friend Ruchira Gupta, who has an organization called Apni Up, which works with prostituted women in the red light district. Her theory is she needs to work in the red light districts to give them other employment opportunities and to make sure that she works with their kids. So there's an exit pattern, that there is an exit route if they choose to exit, especially the kids, because most of the kids of prostituted women end up being prostituted themselves, right? So she has a very strong presence in the red light districts, mobilizing women from within. So she gets me this story, this interview with a brothel owner. And he agrees to speak with me. And I go, and he says, okay, you have to come into the brothel. Okay, I go into the brothel. I'm waiting with him with my camera and my producer, and he makes us wait for 2 hours. Demonstrating his power, that's fine, we're sitting. And he discovers, the brothel owner, that I'm a Muslim. My name, Zainab, is a very popular Muslim name. In America, it's a unique name, but for those who are in Bosnia and Kosovo, you know it's a very popular and a very old name. So back home, like you throw something and it will land on a Zainab. So it's not, you know. Seriously, while here, it's like, wow, what a unique name, you know. Anyway, he realized I'm a Muslim and he gets excited. He opens up. I'm one of his people. And he's like, oh my God, he brings me his sons to recite the Quran in front of me. I'm like, oh my God, they are the sons in the brothel. They're reciting the Quran. Their mother is prostituted women. I mean, it's like, this is really weird. But he opens up to me. He opens up and was very, we hit it off, let's say it, you know, let's say it that way. He opens up and he started talking very clearly about it. I buy these women for this price. I buy them and they have to work for me for 5 years for free to pay off the price that I paid for them. They sleep with about 15 guys a day. Don't worry, it's just a job for them. Don't worry, I charge them for room and board, and I charge them for sending their kids to school if they have babies and if they have kids. And he's very, very clear, right? And I always believe people in darkness are very clear about their darkness. In my experience, they're not ambivalent. They're not trying to think that they are good. He's clear he's doing this way. And at one point, he sees me. I don't have a good poker face. For those who have maybe hang out with me in the last couple of days, I'm very expressive. So he looks at my disgust, basically, of him. And at one point, he says, you look down at us. And you, in this case, I didn't only think it of me, literally, but I think also, and then he clarified, me representing all the women, feminist, liberal women outside of the red light districts, right? He said, you guys, you all look down at us. You joke about us, you sit in your fancy dinners and someone crack a story about a joke about a prostitute and everyone laughs. You never question whether these women are going to prisons or not prisons or whatever. You don't understand. You are part of the problem. And this is when I take a pause, like, what? What the heck you're talking about? He says, it is your fathers and your sons and your brothers and your male friends who are the clients. Who do you think we are supplying? It is your men in your life that we are supplying to. And it is you, women, who are treating other women badly, such as your maids or other women who are working for you. And who do you think takes advantage of your own darkness, of your own shadow that you're not willing to acknowledge? I do. Now, he is talking clearly about that. So anyway, whatever that is, and this is not a discussion about trafficking against women, and I do think that this is or rather prostitution versus sex work, a division in the feminist movement, as you all know, that I wish we actually heal and be in conversation. This is not this discussion. This is a discussion about someone pointing the finger at a direction that I had never looked at. Okay, so, and it doesn't give him the justification for his own violence and his own injustices, but I never looked at the pointing of the direction he's looking at. Are men in my life truly involved in this? And it was my first time that I left that show, I left that interview, and I asked as many men in my life as I could. I asked my brothers, my cousins, my uncles, my friends, my colleagues, my friends' husbands, my friends' sons. I asked as many men as I could. And I did not do it scientifically speaking, so I don't have a survey to report on. But I can tell you the vast majority said, yes, they had paid for sex. And and some of them said, I feel bad and I felt really awful when I did. And some of them said, I continued to do it for a while and then I stopped. And some of them said, I never asked how old is she, if she was underage or not. And some of them said, I took my son to a prostituted woman for the first time, as his introduction. And it was a shocking for me. And then I started talking with my other female friends and I realized I am in a very feminist circle. Two of my top feminist friends discovered their husbands have been paying for sex throughout their marriage. And that their husbands have not actually asked, how old is she? Is she really 18? Or is she 16? Or she's 13 or 14 or whatever it is. And that's when the discussion suddenly is not us versus them. That's when the discussion is closer. It's like, what have I done wrong? Where did I miss in here in terms of the discussion? I'm just getting my own light. What have I missed what have I missed in the discussion? It is like the brothel. It doesn't give him the justification for what he's doing, but he's right. I have sat in tables and there were jokes about prostituted women and I did laugh. And what have I missed about engaging with men in my own life? And what does that mean? And where do you go wrong with that? And with me and my other feminist friends, we actually started, with one of their leaderships, started surveying men in America and trying to understand what is the reality and what's the percentage of men who are paying for sex and what's the percentage, what are they saying about the ages of these women. And in the process, we discovered that, and it's not only this story, in the process, frankly, of me working with so many women survivors of wars, that it's an exhausting process of seeing one woman after another coming to you, displaced and cut and damaged because of war. And at one point, you realize, oh my God, I can't just fix that. I need to engage with the other. So it's phase 2. Phase 1, I hate the other. I hate the heck out of the other. And I have so much anger at the other. And in my case, this was against men because you're seeing what's been happening here all along. And so when you start engaging with the others and you engage in a different you have to like utilize different tools, which in my time, and I honestly don't know if it's still controversial or not, but two things happen. In my time, I went to, in the countries that I work in, I was like, we can't just keep on getting these women who are raped and we're not talking to the rapists. And so we developed, myself and my colleagues at Women Forum International, leadership training for men, right? And it's all the leaders, the religious leaders, the militia leaders, and these are criminals, just so we know. I mean, and I was working, it particularly started in Congo. These are criminals that are, and at one point I was like, I actually don't care until the damn UN finds them and arrests them, and they should find them and arrest them. We need to stop the rape today, because we can't continue. It's just a horrible act. And so we started developing this leadership training, and we train men about how to be a good leader, except all the examples we were using are about how to be a good leader vis-a-vis women, right? So you're a good leader if you treat women like this. And the program became so successful that a year later I went in Congo, and I was talking to a group of men I'm surrounding, and this guy was talking about how he was the head of one of the militias, and how he actually, every time he went to another man's hut or home, and he had a gun and the other man did not have a gun, the guy never questioned raping his wife. He always raped her. Until he went to the leadership training and he understood, oh, I could get HIV. Right? So it was a non-moral argument that we engage with men. It was a very pragmatic argument. Oh, I could get HIV. And if I get HIV and my friends get HIV and my soldiers, then they die. And I can get it to my family and then they could die. So he's like, I stopped because I didn't want to die. And because he stopped raping other women, he said, I end up spending more time with my wife. And after 6 months of spending more time with his wife, they start liking each other because they had separate lives. And after trusting each other, 6 months of spending, I guess, having a lot of sex with each other, 6 months, of not raping, So finally she trusts him and he trusts her. And, she tells him, this is how much money I make. And he tells her, well, this is how much money I make. And they pull their money together. And a year later, they're doing much better. He has a better house, better relationship with his family, and he ended up transforming completely and spending his time advocating against rape, not for moral reason, for a pragmatic reason for his interests, right? It was heavily criticized by a lot of feminists in different parts of the world, and I still can take it. I was like, because someone needs to arrest them, and until that, someone needs to do something to mitigate, the process. But this is either, and it engaged, but that led me, both the work with the prostituted women and that work with raped women. And then by the way, this program, we expanded it to Afghanistan, and we would write the imam speeches, for their for their Friday prayers. I mean, we got so savvy about it but we used the ego of the men to say, you are a great leader if you are like this, and it worked. But the highlight of this experience, what I want to share, is that it changed the relationship from them as being others to an invitation to engage in discussions. And for some, it became a moral discussion, not all men kill or not all men rape. For others, it became a pragmatic strategy of how do we engage. It became a discussion of healthy masculinity, as my friend Tony Porter from A Call to Man, who's talking about how do we really define manhood. It became a discussion about dialogue between men and women and what does it mean and why and all of that. Frankly, it created to some very scary discussion for me. A discussion where men, not the rapists, but one time I was with a very well-known man in America that I had taken to Congo. And the other time was with a videographer from South Africa in Congo. And in the middle of Congo, and Congo is one of the worst acts of, it's not all violence is bad. In Congo, I don't want to compare. In the middle of the night, we were all sitting and drinking and talking and processing all the horror that we saw. These two men talk and they say, I understand how these men raped. And up until that moment, I would have shouted at you, like, how dare you be like the, and that forced me to engage, to say, why? Why do you understand their rape? What is going on? And really engage in the complexities of what it means to be a man, because a man is not one thing and a woman is not one thing. And I had to shift my anger into a much more dialogue and discovery of the other, right? And understanding that the good and the bad and the ugly happens with men, and the good and the bad and the ugly happens to women. But this is neither here nor there about what really was a transformative moment for me. The one that it transformed is back to Iraq, but because that was really close. Because at the end of the day, my father and my brothers did not rape, there's, still a distance, these men, you engage, all of that, but still a distance. But in Iraq, you go back, and I get like really emotional talking about it. And I start the visit with the house I grew up in. And yesterday you heard me talk. It actually transformed, after 2003, the invasion of 2003, it became an execution center, a brothel, a military base. What I didn't say is that that house was known as the house of Saddam Hussein's pilots. So here's another like a disconnection that I have created for myself. I am the daughter of Saddam Hussein's pilot and friend. I look at all the discussion of Putin and all of that. Imagine being one of his friends. I was that, right? I was that close to that dictator of one of the most famous dictators of the last century. And I called him uncle. And I saw him every single day of my life since I was 11 years old. Not every single day, every single week. And it's a complex relationship. This is not about the subject of my discussion, is not about that. I did write a whole book about that as my way of liberation of the truth of shame, the shameful story, right? Of that I was the person who was feared by the rest of the country. I was the daughter of Saddam Hussein's pilot. The house was known, Saddam Hussein's pilot's house. The car I drove said the car of Saddam Hussein's pilot. Everything, all my identity. My friends in high school and in college would sing patriotic songs in my ears because they believed my earrings had a bug, and that they need to sing patriotic songs so then the government would know that they're okay. Now, mind you, it's a complicated relationship. This is, my family were his friends, not because they were politicians, but because they were not into the political system, so they were safe they were not a threat to him. And our role, we were part of the elite. Our role was a very particular role. We are, it's a English-speaking family, Western educated, whatever. We played that very particular role, that to show him how you eat with a fork and a knife, and how do you put lotion, and we did the shopping for him, and all of these things to like package in a society he had no access to, right? And it's also a complex relationship that to leave was to be in danger and to kill the rest of the family. To stay is to succumb to his fear, basically. But the issue is more, so I can justify and I can explain, and it's true. The issue is really Saddam promised flooded everyone with wealth. That's the truth. Flooded everyone with wealth and provided everyone with the dichotomy of, do you choose safety or freedom? And those who have chosen freedom in the country were persecuted, killed, tortured, every asset they had confiscated and left. Literally, my cousin at one point worked as a doctor in the prison. The prisoners were in the basement, one on top of each other with their feces on top of each other, basically. So you choose freedom or you choose security. And if you choose security, you get money and you get all the material things that you need, houses, cars, all of that. My family was not the only one. Everyone was that. We probably got better stuff, right? We got the Mercedes. But the truth is, the offer was for everyone. You send your boys to the front lines to fight Iran. For every boy who would be killed in the front line, the government would give you a house and a car. Second boy, more house and more cars. Third, more houses and more cars. And then it became money. And you get $10,000, and then you get $20,000, and your kids are guaranteed in school. And you have all of this domino effect that eventually, not me saying, people in Iraq are saying, we allowed it to happen. That eventually you say, there's money and there is power. Like, okay, fine. You want my freedom? I will not say a joke about you. I will not criticize your oppressive leadership. I will not talk about your persecution of the Kurds or the Shias or of women. I will not say anything, but you give me security. And that dichotomy was always, always there. The fight of the century between my mother and my father. I grew up in a very tumultuous household. My mother saying, let us escape and leave. And my father saying, we've got to stay still. That is like the fight of my life, basically. Escape and get freedom, and stay and get stability. And someone talked about silence. You talked about silence today, because what it leads you is to silence. And silence, there's a suicidal aspect of silence. You die. Something in you dies in silence. And literally, just to give you an example, and my uncle, it was not only my family were close with Saddam, but my uncle, the family was captured by that relationship. Let me just say it this way. At one point, my uncle in the Gulf War, in the second Gulf War, Saddam's brothers were hiding at my uncle's home. And he tells me that during one of the raids on the American raids on the country, and he says in the middle of the afternoon, they were taking a nap. He goes in the garden, in the middle of the garden, and he sees American planes flying on top. And he's talking to the planes, the firefighters. And he says, this is my home. My entire family is here. My kids and grandkids are here. This is everything I own is here. And Saddam's brothers are here. Please bomb us. And if it takes killing everything in my life, I'm okay with this. But please bomb us to get rid of them. Right? So there is that suicidal tendency, like because you're silent, but the silence kills you. I literally grew up with my mother committing suicide over and over and over again. And she would tell me, I can see the prison bars. I just cannot prove they exist. They're golden. This is her words, not mine. They're golden prison bars, but I cannot prove to everyone that I am in prison. Right? So there is something about the price of freedom versus security that is so easy. There's, during after the invasion of Iraq, there's a lot of uprising. If you remember, there was a civil war, and every American asked me, is it better during Saddam, or is it better after Saddam? It was the question of the time, And I don't know. I'm living in America, so it's easier, and that's a different story of how I came to America. But one time I went to Iraq, and I asked some group of women who are from a village that is prosecuted by Saddam Hussein. He literally took the boys out of their mother's kitchen and shot them for being in opposition to him. Right? And I asked them, I can't answer this question because I live in America. Everyone is asking me this. Can you tell me which one is better, Saddam's time? It was more like, tell me please so I can report it, right? And this one woman whose son was eating breakfast at her kitchen table, and the government snatched him out and shot him in front of his mother, said, Saddam provided to us security, and America gave us freedom. And if I have to choose between security and freedom, I will choose security. Okay? Whoa. But then that security led to what I discovered in my journey towards Mosul. So I'm driving from my home, my actual home that I no longer recognize because now it's a million house in front. I don't recognize. And I drive for 3 hours, 3 hours that I'm very familiar with because Saddam had a vacation home in Mosul and we always would go there. And 3 hours from Baghdad to Mosul. And that, imagine driving 3 hours of utter and complete destruction. It's rubbles. It's unfathomable destruction. And I've worked so many countries, honestly. This perhaps was the worst because it was flats. You know, and village after village after village after city, schools, mosques, churches, stores, everything. And by the time I was in Mosul, and this was 3 weeks after ISIS was overthrown, I was in such pain and anger. I was like, oh my God, I understand those who have rebelled against America. Right? It's like, if this is what you're seeing, that destruction that this country contributed to, oh my God, I am in rage. Because it is your home. Right? So it's like, and it's scary to have that feeling even. You know, it's like, I understand. Now I want to tell you, I'm a mystic, I meditate and I pray every day. I am in love with divine and right? And there, 150 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit, I don't know what that's, 50 degrees Celsius, and complete destruction, no, you lose it. You lose all the tools you have to be insane person, basically. Now, by the time I arrived to Mosul, right, and this destruction is not me, this destruction, you know, I just recently interviewed a US, the first female fighter pilot in the US Navy. And in her book, she talks about how, and I've interviewed many US soldiers, right? And they all, the ones I interviewed, the ones I really engage in discussions with, they all talk about the moral rupture in their own hearts between throwing bombs at some other people and knowing that this is actually causing death. You know, there's one soldier who said, you know, they said, throw a bomb, cluster bomb, one. Cluster bomb is like one bomb goes into a million, right? They said, we did it. The commander said, again, we did it. Again, we did it 3 times. Again, 4 times, we did it. He said, at that point, we were looking at the commander saying, we got, you know, I think that everything in that village is destroyed, it's okay. Again, 5th time, 6 times, again, do it. And this captain who's telling me this story, saying, by the 6th time, we committed a massacre. Okay? The fire pilots talk about how it's one thing to throw a bomb, it's another thing in her heart, the moral discrepancy between I am killing people and I am also being a good military person, doing my duty, and the rupture of that. So the destruction America did cause a lot of it. It's not me being gung-ho, right? But then I arrived Mosul, and then they provided me a different narrative in Mosul. And when they were saying, and thus comes the title of my presentation, Message from the Abyss. Because when I was in Mosul, and I'm just walking as I am now, with, okay, I had a team, a young team, a videographer, a producer, a driver, and I made sure they're all from different ethnic groups in case we get captured by any militia. I had a Kurd, a Sunni, a Shia, a Christian, you know, covering my bases basically in case anybody. But we were just walking, and people were literally walking to me, and this is garbage collectors, policemen, teachers, housewives, students. This is language, not mine. This is their language in a universal way. They're saying, this destruction that you're seeing, we did it. We became the nuclear bomb on our lives. And I was like, whoa, because I'm just coming from that, all this, right? And they're like, we became the nuclear bomb on our lives. And they start talking, and they're like, every power promised us wealth, every rise of power promised us wealth and power in exchange for us to do something back. Saddam promised us wealth and power in exchange for us to kill the Iranians and our own Shia population. We did it. Then America promised us wealth and power, but America did not deliver neither wealth nor power. So we fought against it, and that was a different discussion, right? Al-Qaeda came and promised us wealth and power. And Al-Qaeda's rules: kill Christians, kill Shias, kill Christians and kill Shias, okay? And persecute women. And we did it. And then ISIS came, and ISIS added, kill Christians, kill Shia, kill Yazidis. And we did it. And they said, we continue to do what was promised for us. Do this, kill this, until, this is people of Mosul speaking, until our own sons turned the guns on us. If we did not implement their own rules of what is the religion and what is the rules that we have to live there. And they said, when our own sons turned the guns on us, that's when we realized, oh my God, we are the nuclear bomb. No one threw it on us. We did it to ourselves this time. Whoa. We are the nuclear bomb. There is one woman who said, she came out of the house. I mean, I can't describe that. In the future, I will use photos to demonstrate what I'm talking. She's like, do not help us to fix the rubble. We'll clean it up, don't worry. We will fix our homes, don't worry. That's not a big deal. What we need help in is how to articulate new value systems. We need new human beings, because the old values that were lived in did not carry us through. It failed us. And we can't blame, okay, you can blame Saddam, oppressor did bad things. America did destroy things. But it's like, this is us doing it. And it was everyone, and this is all over the city, saying, we need a new human being. We need a new value system. So I left wondering, okay, well, what is these value systems? And how can we come up with these new value systems? And who am I? Because if anybody articulate these new value systems, don't we then replicate the sort of the authoritarian leaders? This is the new value systems that you have. I mean, I grew up with an authoritarian thing. Here is, to even go to survive. We talk about artists. For all artists to survive in Iraq, they had to paint Saddam Hussein and put a face put it on every single art piece. So what do you say? This is the new value systems that you can't. How do you discover these new value systems, and how do we come about articulating them? Now, I do know one thing. I do know that we need to make this 21st century the feminine century. I do know that. And what's at stake is our humanity. I really believe that. And when I say that, I'm not talking about values. I'm really talking about Earth. If we don't shift our behavior patterns towards Earth, if we do not shift the meaning of greed and our capitalism and our economy and our society and how we buy and how we are destroying ourselves. I find it fascinating that there is a war in Russia and Ukraine. We're poisoning Earth. as we need to actually stop the poison, as we need to put poison out of it, we're putting more poison in it, and it's going to be our humanities at stake, right? So I know we need to transform. I know that in COVID time, we have politicians speaking about compassion and love and all of that. I know we need to like transform, but how do you go about these transformation? Now, so I'm saying this in transparency that I do not know. But I do know few things, or I discovered few things that emerge as a result of my discovery. And I'm actually in the middle of the process of discovery, and that is one reason why I loved and enjoyed our conversation in the last 2 days so much, because it is about these value systems. And you know, you are looking into what are these and demonstrating how to live these value systems. So how do we go about it? And this is my theory, and then it's not a complete theory whatsoever. One is we need to learn what I call the language of the heart. Now, what is the language of the heart? I almost died 3 years ago. Literally, I almost died. I took my last breath 3 years ago. And in that moment between life and death, which everyone is going to face it, it's a very intimate moment. It doesn't matter how much friends or family or loved ones you have around you. It's a very intimate moment. That moment for me, as I thought like, this is it, I'm dying, was not did I accomplish enough. Was not did I get enough awards. It was actually irrelevant, to be honest. The question that came, did I live my life in kindness to myself and to others? Did I live my life in love to myself and to others? And up until that moment, I had not. I mean, as a humanitarian, I had, right? You do this for other people, but it's different than to the self, right? And different, frankly, to the others right in front of you. It's different to help the larger others rather than the others in here or to the self. And because I was able, I could not think, my ability to speak words were gone from me. So I couldn't articulate, I would not have been able to do that. What I end up doing is meditating for hours and hours and hours because there is nothing else to do. I couldn't do anything. And what I came to discover actually is the heart has knowledge. And it actually has a language. And all what I need to do is like, we need to learn that language of the heart. And we have been in a society so far, we put so much on mind, so much pressure on mind, value on mind. We brag about, we quote this theory or this theory with this professor or this, forgive me, I didn't mean, but like, you know, we talk about these things, but we really don't tap into the language of the heart. And what does that mean? And for me, I end up discovering that the language of the heart, talking about emotions, we talked about emotions. This may be just my own framing because there was a lot of talk about emotions, especially in the session before, right? And it's not the positive, it's not only the positive emotion, as in love and kindness and compassion. It's actually, we need to tap into the negative emotion as well. The anger, the jealousy, the greed, the fear, the loneliness, the worry, the anxiety, the depression. These are equally important emotions. And I'm not saying it only for mental well-being in here. They're equally important emotions. They are major emotions to help us become compassionate when we are speaking with the other. You know, I think, I don't know who was saying, kept on asking the terrorists, is there any good in you? Is there any good in you? That emotions in us, it helps us tap into these conversations. How do I know how do I know why would ISIS member drop his weapon if I don't understand what it means to have this arrogance and that power? And I may not have the same arrogance as he does, or I don't know how to use weapon, but I need to tap into my negative emotion and understand my negative emotion in order to understand the negative emotion of the other, or at least have a point of reference in my engagement with the understanding of the negative emotions of the other. Am I making sense in here, right? Because otherwise we keep the old paradigm, I keep the old paradigm, thus the us and them, as opposed to me and you, which is I'm tapping into my fear and talk and to understand your fear, right? So one is understanding the language of the heart, and they have technique, in my opinion, a function, a huge function. An example of that, I remember a South African friend got, who was an active in the anti-apartheid movement, got kidnapped, and by two black men. And they handcuffed him, but they did not blindfold him. They handcuffed him, put him in the back of the seat of the car, and they're driving him to a dark place after they stole everything that he had, so they can drop him in the middle of the desert and shoot him. And he just says, he looks in they're looking at him in the eyes, and he's like, pfft. He does this. And they're like, what? And he's like, nothing. What? Nothing. And then finally he says, it's like, if you don't tell us, we'll shoot you. And he says, I was just thinking how sad. We fought all our lives for liberation, and I end up, the irony that I end up being killed by two black men. My friend is black as well. What an irony in here. How sad that this is what we fought for. But this is an emotional engagement, right? They did not kill him. They dropped him. They did not kill him. A Ugandan friend of mine who her torturer was being tortured, she looks at him in the eyes. And there's an emotional connection in that process, and that he stopped torturing her. There are examples over and over and over that if we tap into the emotions and we actually put values of studying, accessing them, understanding our emotions, that becomes a functional process in whatever that we're trying to create, the change that we're trying to create. Today, you talked about being sincere. I call it truthful and authenticity. It's the same thing. We need to be truthful. There is no such thing. I am telling you, there is no such thing as I'm only good. There is also a bad part of me, a shadow part of me, not to be ashamed of, to tap into it, understand it, put control over it. But that discrepancy of us and them, which happens so much in this country, as we all know, it does not have a prolonged, it's not sustainable. It keeps on dividing us. So we need to show up in authenticity and in truth. And that means talking about our own issues as well, right? So as a Muslim, woman of color, an immigrant woman, you have your own share of discrimination, right? And prejudice. And the prejudice is easy for me to tell you that prejudice only comes from conservative. It comes from liberals as well. There is an underlying prejudice against Muslims in this country and perhaps in the world, right? It's all over. It's with the best intention. There is the understanding that Muslims are ignorant, violent, backward, all of these things. And, it's constantly insult and hurt the heart. Right? And I used to snap at the person, and I would call them, you're racist, you're bigot, you're sexist, you're right? It's we're good at this thing. And one day I decided to, because the minute I call someone a racist, what I do is I am as engaged in creating a wall and a separation as they are. Immediately I cut the discussion. Well, one day I decided to, which is the third point, to engage in what I call the uncomfortable conversation, right? Because unless we engage in the uncomfortable conversation, we can continue to say, you're racist, I'm not, and at the end of the story, and that doesn't lead us anyway. So there's one day I sat in front by accident in a public dinner in front of a woman who supports Trump and who is a conservative and who believes at the height of the violence, there's a lot of terrorist attacks here, that Muslims are here to come and take over the United States and change the constitution and force all women to wear hijab and all of these things, and which is a real fear. This is not, So I look at her and I said, you're afraid? And she said, yes. So I didn't call her racist, first of all. I was like, you're afraid? Yes. You're afraid that this is happening, it's going to happen? Yes. Actually, I'm afraid too. You are? Yes, I'm afraid that you're gonna do that to me. It's true. It is true, by the way. I even have an emergency list. What happens in case I get, rounded with all Muslims and go to some camp in somewhere? It's true. I was like, you do? Yes, I'm afraid. I'm also afraid of those same fundamentalist crazy people. I'm like equally afraid of them. I'm not. And it changed into a turning point by showing up authentically, sincerely. Talk about your own fear from her, but from the same people she's afraid of. Finding the point in here is find one point. I don't believe in necessarily we have to find common ground and compromise and all of that. That's not my world, right? My world is find one point of emotional understanding, because that one point of emotional understanding can create a new path of discussion, not compromise. I am not going to change being a feminist and a liberal and an advocate for immigrants in the United States, but I can find a point in which I understood her and she understood me, and that point is good enough to engage in a new conversation. So that's the second point. Third point is be courageous, actually, to shift the story, change the narrative. Change the rules of engagement, to be more exact. And I learned that from a Palestinian father and an Israeli father, Bassam and Rami. Bassam is a Palestinian father who's an Israeli soldier, killed, shot in the head, a sniper, his 9-year-old girl, as she left from school during a curfew. She did not know there's a curfew. He shot her in the head. So I'll talk Bassam's story, and then I will talk about Rami's story. And Bassam is living in the West Bank, and there's a lot of pressure. His child's picture was in all posters all over the West Bank as a martyr, and that there's a pressure on him that he must take revenge for the child's death. And his 13-year-old son saying, I want to join some of the groups and do suicide bombing so I can avenge my sister's death. And Bassam stays for a year thinking about what he should do, right? With a lot of pressure from his community. You must demand revenge. He finally goes and finds the Israeli soldier who did what he did, and knocks on his door. And he tells him, I am the father of the girl you shot. What you did was criminal. My community is putting pressure on me to kill you so I can get revenge. I am not going to kill you. I'm just going to tell you here that the day you understand what you have done, come to me. I am her father. I will forgive you. The day you understand what you have done. And his logic is, if I end up doing, and if my son goes and commit a suicide bomb, then I become part of the perpetual cycle that we need to exit from. The Israeli's father, Rami, his daughter was in a bus that got exploded by a suicide bomber. She's 13 years old. And he was livid. He describes himself, I was a racist, sexist who thought Palestinians are all cockroaches. Like that's how he described himself, right? And he said, every part of me wanted to pick up the gun and go and just shoot a heck of Palestinians. And his sons as well, and etc. But then he said, I needed to answer a question before. Why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? And he goes into an investigative, he finds an organization that allows him to go to Palestinians and engage in discussion, like, why do you hate us? And comes out of that experience saying, okay, I understand. And I'm not going to kill anybody. I'm actually going to create an organization for bereaved parents of both sides to come together because we need to change the story. What these two men did changed the narrative. What's expected from them in society was to do X, Y, and Z. And it took a lot of discipline and efforts for them to change the narrative willingly. Now, the third, last point I want to see, I'm seeing a lot of you are starting to be tired, and I don't want to get between you and dinner. So change the rules of engagement. And the last thing I want to say, it's a lonely process. It's a lonely process. It's easy to talk, to be a hero and change, and all these people that I just mentioned, whether it is Bassam or whether it is Rami, and whether it's a lonely process to be someone who is creating that change of narrative. And I don't know how you felt, if it felt lonely or not. But if the person who are outside of the paradigm of what is expected of him or her do something different, it is not an easy process. And to do that, I have few things to end with. Lately, I am obsessed with turtles. I am a very fast person. All my childhood, I loved the Bugs Bunny and the turtle, you know, the thing. I associate it with Bugs Bunny. I had no emotions towards the turtles. It's slow, it took its time, it bored me to death, and I am a Bugs Bunny, right? You go and move very fast, and you get that, you know, and then you wait, and then it's like, okay, everyone, come with me. Lately, I'm starting to appreciate turtles a lot. Because what I'm starting to understand is that to get into this process of change and the transformation from the anger to the reflection, to be engaging with the other in a new way, to engaging yourself in a new way, to shifting a dialogue and shifting and leading a new path of engagement, and demonstrate leadership by demonstrating yourself what is possible, is a very slow process. It's a turtle's journey. It is not a Bugs Bunny journey. And so I want to end with a few things, which is, this is a process of building a bridge, but bridges will be destroyed. Build a bridge again. I am sure it will be destroyed again. Build a bridge until so many people are part of building that bridge, it cannot be destroyed. That the transformation we're looking at is actually a slow transformation. It is not a fast transformation. But it enabled me to trust in life. So I want to end with Iraq, of a story that is truly not told. So after ISIS and after overthrow of ISIS, and after the Iraqis in Mosul tell me, oh my God, we are the ones who did this to ourselves. They, in Iraq, we have, as you all know, I'm sure, fighting between Sunni and Shias, Christian and Muslims, Yazidi and Muslim, all of that, right? The people of Mosul took a bus. The first action they did, they got on a bus to go and drive to all these other groups of people, the Christians, the Kurds, the Shias, and drive to their villages and towns and cities to thank them for sending their troops to fight and liberate them from ISIS. And these are people that they had killed, right? They drove throughout the country, and as they arrived to the Kurdish villages or the Shia villages or the cities and all of that, they were welcomed with flowers. And 3 years later, after that incident, I went to Iraq in 2018. That's when ISIS was overthrown. A year later, October 2019, the most unbelievable story of unity among Iraqis rose, where people, millions of people, Christians and Muslims, Yazidis, women and men, took over the streets of the country for 6 months, saying, we are done with this division, and we are demanding a new story of unity moving forward. It was the most unbelievable story of love, that the media did not cover it, not in America, I don't think in Europe either actually, but it was the most unbelievable story of love. And they had to stop only after COVID has taken. So, did they win? Build a bridge, they will destroy it. Build a bridge again, they will destroy it. Build a bridge until so many people are part of building that bridge, it cannot be destroyed. They made enough of a dent that made me ultimately to trust in life and trust in the triumph of hope and trust in justice that would ultimately come. At the end of the day, Saddam is gone. And at the end of the day, so many Iraqis stand up to tell the story, and so many women stand up to tell the story, and so many Kosovar and Bosnian and Basque and so many people. I do believe that it gives us the triumph of hope. I do believe in the triumph of hope. We just have to rise from the victims to actually to the leaders that model what new leadership looks like, to make this century the feminine century. Thank you. Thank you. I would only take the clap that I spoke in darkness, but other than that, I will give myself that credit, but other than that, it is I who are grateful for you.